Well, Arafat Salvador, welcome to the Lyle podcast. It is so wonderful to have you here this afternoon.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you. It's wonderful to talk to you, and I'm super excited to do this.
Yeah, so it's been fun to reconnect with you recently because we've been friends for a number of years, but then
Yeah.
had a bit of a gap where we weren't in much communication. And I'm so glad that we're reconnected and um, have the sense, that when we've gotten together that we can just there's so much to talk about, right? And
I
so
know. Yes, yes, yes. It's been really wonderful, and there's been a whole lot of growth um, that's happened, and you almost feel and sound like a different person to me from but even though it hasn't been a crazy long time, but yeah, a lot's obviously happened, and there's been a whole lot of betterness, I'd say. So
yeah.
for both of
Yeah.
us.
I think so.
And
Yeah. And maybe we can explore some of that today. And thank you for saying that. I mean, I do. Growth is like an interesting thing, right? Where you can feel like you're doing all this work and changing, but you're not really sure how it's being received by other people, or if
right.
the what's inside of you is being extroverted, if it's manifesting elsewhere, or if it's because there's different phases. Sometimes there's just changes that are happening inside, but it
Hmm.
doesn't.
Yeah.
So I do feel like I've changed a lot. So
Yes, yes,
so I
you have.
appreciate that, and I receive that in a positive light.
Yeah, it's good. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be here on the podcast. So this podcast is all about what it means to live your healthiest life, and we'll explore that. And I'm excited to learn from you today your perspective on that. As we just kind of get into it, how would you describe your work and vocation?
Ooh, I'm an attorney,
Mhm.
and I specialize in workers' compensation defense. I work for a staffing agency, I'd say, or a staffing company. And so I have a number of things I have to deal with them, for them, primarily in workers' compensation. So I don't have a particularly interesting work, I'd say. I wish I was an artist of some kind.
Yeah,
At least
yeah.
in my dreams, I'm always hoping, oh gosh, I wish I was an artist.
Well, actually, I just wrote that down because we've talked about how we're just going to kind of flow with this conversation and take it how
Yeah.
it comes. But I just wrote down, I was like, I want to talk to her about photography.
Yes.
Because you are quite talented in that. So you're saying you wish you were an artist, but of course, you have that artistry in you, of course.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love photography, and I remember even before I started shooting, um, when I would go to the museums and galleries, I always kind of seek out the photography section first. And so it's always been something that's just after my heart and after my soul. So I just really love photography, and I'm so glad that even though I don't get to be a photographer every single day, I get to actually still kind of put out, my photography maybe on Instagram, sharing with friends. And on some occasions, I've actually had the opportunity to travel and even, kind of sell some of my work. So yeah, I love being a photographer as well as an attorney. And I don't actually hate being an attorney. I actually really like being an attorney. I think my perspective or the way I interpret being an attorney is also pretty powerful, and in my own kind of way. So I really do like being an attorney, and I feel like there's so much more to come from me, even in that realm. While I I hope I wish while I wish I was an artist, I also feel like it's doing something like law is pretty important, and I understand the privilege of being able to do that as well.
Yeah, when we met a few weeks ago and we are kind of catching up, yeah, you were sharing about just the work that you do, and that you're good at it, and that you're efficient, and that helping people kind of come to resolution of conflicts and problems, and how meaningful that is. So even if you're working on the behalf of a company, that if there's a determination, if the right thing is, to give the funds to that person, that you can help expedite that, and how
Right.
important that is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So in that way, in that sense, my work is quite fulfilling. While, kind of lawyer is, it's adversarial in many ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be in practice. It doesn't have to be that every second of, your practice. Yes, you must advocate for your client, but at the same time, there's always a middle ground where you're able to do the right thing and also being able to kind of protect your client at the same time. There's always that middle ground, and that's where I always seek to be, while doing what I do.
Yeah. What is that touching on what drew you to be an attorney?
I didn't even think that, sort of outside of practice, you might think a lot about the adversarial side of things, because in law school, you have this sort of moot um, courts, like a pretend court where, you practice advocacy and presenting your case and arguing your case in front of a judge, quote unquote. Um, because of that, you don't necessarily completely see what the picture can be like in practice. So I was actually, for very many years after I, graduated law school, I really didn't practice law at all. I just didn't feel like it was something that was for me, but it really was for me. It just wasn't.
Hmm.
Maybe I couldn't see how one could be fulfilled doing something like that, kind of arguing all day and being adversarial every second. But practicing law, I realized much later that practicing law didn't need to be like that. Yes, there might be moments where you do have to zealously advocate for your client, and you do that in every way. But at the same time, you know, be negotiating, settlement, negotiating things. It means that you're seeking to hear the other side, and also kind of being able to put yourself in other people's shoes while you're still able to zealously, like, advocate for your client. It takes a little special, like, kind of balancing, and I feel like I have that, and just as I grow as an attorney, I feel like I'm going to continue to master that, and being able to find the balance between um, ensuring that I, kind of save this company money, but also understanding that there's just people at the very end of all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. When we first met, I don't, you were an attorney at the time, but you didn't really lead with that. Like, I didn't know that, which is very interesting, especially in a culture, because we met here in Los Angeles, that's usually like the first thing is like, oh, what do you do? It's all very like, what do you do? And that's even a bit how I lead off this conversation, and not because like our work or how we make money is where our value comes from, but when we think vocation, kind of like what do we want our life to be about? But that was an interesting thing to me, that because it seems to me that you have an essence where you didn't need to identify with that, to present
Actually,
yourself.
yes,
And
that's
yeah.
right. Yeah, that's very true, actually. And it is actually, I didn't realize that I was doing that, but also I do think about that. So it's interesting that you felt that, at least. Because it's slightly conscious but unconscious at the same time.
Hmm.
Because I didn't think it was, while components of it might be central to who I am, the profession in itself, I would, if I did exactly what I do and I was a carpenter, I would be happy at the same time. So
Hmm.
it just
Hmm.
wasn't, and it's still, and I'm still learning that daily, because I know sometimes in the moments that I'm a little insecure or something, I may just kind of be like, oh, I'm an attorney or something like that. It might,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
that really just come from maybe an insecurity more than anything. And so I have to consciously kind of remind myself, like, even without this sort of profession that I have, um, I just am, and I'm,
Hmm.
and and that's kind of important to me. And so consciously, sometimes I try not to necessarily lead with, I'm this or I'm that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very interested, to even if you're willing to like crack open that door a little bit more and explore it, like what other components, because yeah, when I consider just vocation, or even just what we're about it, yeah, it isn't just necessarily the 9 to 5 or however many hours, the 7 to 7, whatever whatever hours people are doing, but like the other things that make us, because I do believe our our individuality matters,
Yes, indeed.
right?
Yes, indeed.
And so I would love to just hear a little bit more about you, and maybe it's um just what the rest of that looks like. We mentioned photography. Does it have something about artistry, or as you view and kind of approach, um like what you think you're here, to do and to contribute?
Mm, yeah. Um, I take that day by day, I would say,
Mhm.
just because even if I spend the rest of my life sort of not doing photography professionally, and it's just like a hobby that I have, I still will be absolutely happy just because I get to do it in one way, whether it's just one person that sees a photo that I take or it's a million people. I don't think that it completely matters to me. At least I haven't felt like that.
Mhm.
What brings me joy, and that sort of resolute joy, is just being and being well
Mhm.
daily,
Mhm.
and making each day count, not in the sort of hustling or producing or of anything, just having like a fulfilled day, whether that's just having a good day with my daughter or my husband or with a friend.
Mhm.
I think that's just where I'm at. I don't need a whole lot. I don't need
Mhm.
uh, a million people to see my photos, and neither do I need to be a high powered attorney. I just want to be, if that means, if everything that I do daily takes me to be some sort of super high powered attorney, that's wonderful. If that takes me to be, you know, um, a famous photographer, that's wonderful too. But uh, I'm just content.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I
Yeah.
seek that contentment like
Mm.
more than anything else.
Well, that's a wonderful segue. So the next question frame things here on the Live podcast is, what do you think it means to live your healthiest life? I think you're tapping into that right there.
Yeah. Ooh. Healthiest life, I would say. And I had a chance to think just maybe for like 5 minutes about this, because you sent me a few of the questions that you're going to explore in this podcast today. I thought about it for like 5 minutes, and the first thing that came to my mind was, you know, having a healthy body,
Mm.
and having a healthy mind, and having a healthy soul.
Mm.
And I feel like each of those components have to be in sort of alignment,
Mm-hmm.
to be in your healthiest, at your healthiest. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I feel like those three things are super vital, because if one is not properly aligned, I feel like it throws off the other. I think
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
myself, and I think about moments where I'm really stressed and just kind of my mental state is not truly well. It starts manifesting itself in my body.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
Yeah, and I think about moments where my soul is not at peace, and I'm, sort of rummaging around. It ends up kind of manifesting itself in my mind, uh, and so it goes back to the body. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like a little
Yeah.
circle, it goes round and round. So being healthy for me would be, um, being whole in my body, being whole in my mind, and surely being whole in my soul.
Mm. Wholeness. Um, yeah. I'd love to hear more. I agree with all these things. I'd love to hear more about what does that look like to be whole, or what as you.
Yeah. For me personally, it's as because we're so human, it's impossible to achieve this sort of wholeness 100% at the time. It's not possible to sort of get to it and be there, and that's it. There's ups and downs to things. And so, for one, personally, I would normally try to, at least consistently exercise, consistently eat well, just to make sure my body's well. And this doesn't even mean that I'm perfectly consistent, because there's so many
Yeah, well, who
times I'm
is,
like, oh yeah,
right?
this is
Yeah,
not so great for me, but we only live once. There's that.
yeah.
But surely every day I'm in pursuit of that and making sure
Mm-hmm.
that I'm well. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, my mind is always all over the place. I think a
Mm,
lot. I feel things a lot,
mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's not. I don't even feel like it's a great thing to feel so much, because
Mm,
sometimes if you have a lot of empathy,
mm,
you kind of hold even other people's pain in your body and in your mind,
mm-hmm.
and so
Mm-hmm.
it's just so much going on there. So I try to, while I seek connection with people, and that's really important to me as well, I also find ways to protect myself. um,
Mm. Okay, I'd love to hear about that.
yeah, so I seek ways to protect myself and protect my mind. um, and so it's sort of a back and forth thing. And in terms of my soul, that's hugely connected to my mind, and what I let in into my mind is sort of what I let into my soul. So I've just been working on in general, just daily living. I actually work on these three things, trying to make sure that my mental state is, at rest. If I feel a sort of misalignment, I try to start working on kind of getting back to level one again, or
Mm-hmm.
however you want to describe that, that sort of place where you're happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, I have a 4-year-old, and you know this.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait to meet her. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little one, and one of the questions she does ask me often is, "Are you happy?" She just asks
Oh,
me
she
that all the
does.
time, and I'm sure that she doesn't mean
Oh,
that in a very deep way, like in sort of like,
yeah.
"Is your," but I.
Is it like her? How are you? Is that her?
Mm, I think she's kind of just maybe seeking some sort of validation of herself. Like, are you happy with me? Are
Oh, I
you
see.
okay? Or are you okay?
Uh,
She means that in two ways,
uh,
in the context that she said it. But she does ask this question very often. She sees me just kind of looking on, and she's like, "Are you happy?" And I'm like, "Yes,
mm,
I am happy, actually. I was just, kind of sitting, being quiet." And
mm-hmm.
but even though she doesn't ask this question in the way that in a way that's so deep, maybe in the way that you're asking me right now, it makes me, every single time that she does,
Mm,
it makes me think about like where I'm at mentally. And
mm,
it's
mm-hmm.
it's a subtle reminder. And she does ask me this question maybe, multiple times a day, or at least once a day. She always does. It's so good, and it's just a reminder of, to me, to kind of seek happiness and wholeness. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm having a terrible morning and I know I'm going to come back to my daughter, at home. I remind myself to, kind of regroup and try to like get centered before I get, because I know I don't, I try not to give her the answer of like, "Oh no, I'm actually not happy at all." And, and I want to be
Mm-hmm.
honest with her, even though she's 4. I want to make
Yeah.
sure that when I do answer her, that I'm giving her the right answer, and not the right answer, the truthful answer.
Yeah. 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 Wow. You covered a lot of ground there. Like I'm struck by it's interesting to me and important. I think that's why it's interesting, I think, to me, is what you're saying about like this intensity of feeling and taking in your environment, so taking in other people and the impact that has, on you. And yeah, you mentioned, yeah, I don't know. I'm learning a little bit about that. This is very new, kind of hot off the press for me. So is learning about, and maybe you know about this, but I know it's emergent in general, like in research even, but as people having sensitivities, like, so what is it called? Like highly sensitive people. So HSP. And I don't know if you identify that way, but as I learn about it, I'm like, that sounds like me, that there is a sensitivity to things. And I think it can feel bad, but more because it feels hard and because people don't understand that if they're looking around and, we're expected to act a certain way. But there's a lot of gifts, right, in being sensitive and
Yes, yes,
being,
indeed.
because it's just like an antenna, right? That's just more that you pick up things that other people aren't picking up.
Mm.
And so there's a consequence in that, in terms of maybe you need to just be for a little bit, and maybe your daughter's picking up on that. And so and
Yeah,
maybe
I
she is that same way too, right? That she's like, oh, how's mom? I'm gonna check in, because how mom's doing really impacts me, right?
Mm,
And my sense of self and well-being.
mm.
I'll just pause there. There's not really a question in there. And if you don't want to say anything about that, that's fine. But I think the
No,
question is really about, yeah, is that a bad thing, or or
is
is
it
it
a
in
good
some way
thing?
like a superpower? Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't think it a bad thing. Yes, sometimes it might make you quite vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
to feeling hurt, feeling
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't see it as a bad thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no doubt that you tend to then carry a lot of mental weight. But if you, as you become better, and just being that sensitive anyway, probably helps you have that sense of, okay, I need to seek wellness. I need to seek,
Mm-hmm.
being better. And having that sort of sensitivity also kind of draws you towards goodness too,
Yeah.
and betterness. There's no doubt that it does that. And because of that, while your mind might be pulling you in one direction, um, you're also able to pull yourself in the other direction, because you seek betterness when you're that sensitive, when you know what's good, when you know what's good for people around you, when you know what's good for yourself, when you're attuned to that. So I don't see it as a weakness whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
um, as I become older, I feel more grounded in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And as I become older, and as I have more experiences with people, I find new ways and better ways to treat people. I find new ways and better ways to treat myself. I have a lot more
Mm-hmm.
grace for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
understand humans better. I understand what maybe
Mm-hmm.
drives us. I understand, better when it comes to like the impact of our childhood, the impact of our culture, and the impact of so many things on our world, on the people around us. And so because of that, you gain a level of just understanding that helps you kind of stay a little more balanced, so that you're not
Mm-hmm.
constantly just carrying around the weight of people's pain. You're
Mm-hmm.
understanding that while it's important to feel those things, and that's what drives you to action, that's what drives you to, caring for other people is what drives you
Mm-hmm.
to action.
Mm-hmm.
You also understand that it's okay to kind of find joy. It's okay to not only find joy, to even revel in it, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Well, because
Mm-hmm.
all of these things will be happening at the same time, but it's absolutely okay to find joy for yourself, and revel in that joy. Yeah. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Yeah.
what keeps me sort of balanced, and not just holding on the weight of the entire world, which I almost cannot even affect half of them. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
the kind of money to do it. I don't have the sort of political power. I don't have anything per se. But in a small corner of the world that, I call home, I can seek betterness in that space. And so yeah, I think it's not a terrible thing at all. It's wonderful.
Yeah, agreed. I love like that word of reveling and reveling in joy.
Hmm.
Are there things that you feel comfortable sharing that because that's for me like a practice that I'm like play is something that I want to do this year. Like I want to increase, and it's not just going to be for this year, but I want to increase that in my life. And, you know, I hope the side effect is, more laugh lines, more smile lines as I do that. Are there ways that you, and it might, and because it can look so many things. I'm just saying play, but it can be, I go into beautiful places like nature, right? And that
Yeah.
can bring on a profound sense of joy, and I can just revel in that, or laying in a grass field or watching a sunset, or maybe like with your daughter, like is there anything that you
Yeah, so many things. I'm so intentional about just, finding joy and goodness. And so, yeah, spending time with my daughter definitely is very, important to me. And I love that. I love, kind of seeing things from the eyes of a child.
mm,
I, I love travel, even though I know the pandemic hasn't allowed us to do a whole lot of that. But seeing places, so I've made sure to, even if it means like the local trips here in California, I've been able to do that. Kind of, reading, watching TV and just watching a good
mm-hmm,
show or TV and binge watching something, that's good.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It does
mm-hmm.
bring me joy. And so yeah, I'm pretty intentional about that, I must say. And connecting with people, I love people.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
also hard for me to say because I know that, sometimes you seek connection with people, and in that connection, you might then experience some sort of pain. But yes, it's
Yeah.
still something that brings
Yeah.
me joy, and I'm intentional about spending time with friends, kind of scheduling, a day to just kind of chat with a friend, and, yeah.
Yeah. Those are great. And I think that is um I think certain personalities are drawn more to that, right? To like, seeking out joy or pleasure. But I think there's certain personalities and just like I think societal or I was trying to get a more general term than this, but the term that's coming to mind is like religious, but like or organizational. There's certain structures that maybe and this, sorry, the words that are just coming poo poo that. I wish I could think of a different word than right, that there should be like some like seriousness or
Mm,
stoicism.
two things, yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that, because and I think joy is also different than necessarily just pleasure seeking, or because
Mm,
sometimes we can do things that give like a short-term pleasure that has negative long-term consequences,
yes,
right?
yes, indeed.
And
Yeah.
I think we see that a lot in our society, like
Right.
going to Vegas or something like that. What happens here stays here, like things that it's like, yeah, that was fun, but I don't really want to talk about it because that's, uh wasn't particularly additive, to the
Hmm.
world and what's happening.
Right, right, right.
Do you have any thoughts about maybe like the difference between those? Uh,
Mm. I I don't know if just because humans are so different.
that's true.
And the thing that, sort of brings me joy, as simple as they sound, like, kind of just spending time with a 4-year-old and just driving to some random California city or town might not bring someone joy. It's possible that for someone, for someone else, just going to Vegas and partying that and doing all kinds of stuff that has to stay quiet and stay, might bring them joy. Um, and uh, while other people might argue that, oh, it's not possible, they're just kind of seeking um, a temporary kind of high or happiness or so. You just never know because we humans are
Yeah, there
so
you
different.
go. Yeah.
And there's also another layer that you touched on in terms of religion. Yeah, and uh, I think in most organized religion, a whole lot of things are probably kind of forbidden or at least frowned upon, and so you sort of have to, kind of to stay pure. At least the picture that's painted is that you're kind of in this quietness and zen, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah. So I think of something else that brings me a lot of joy. I love listening to Nigerian pop music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the moments when I'm driving back from work or going to work, and I just put on like a playlist on Spotify or something. And I'm just like, dancing all the way to wherever I'm going. These moments bring me joy too. And
Yes, yes.
I, um, yeah, it's difficult to say because yes, absolutely, kind of doing some Vegas trip might not bring me complete joy and may not, fulfill me in a way. But I imagine that if I went to Vegas with a few friends, maybe aside from maybe doing things that might be detrimental to my health or my body, just being there dancing also might bring me
Mm-hmm.
joy. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't know about like doing anything that we got to keep quiet. That's not necessarily, I guess, because I'm going to be thinking about it and feeling bad about it. That's inevitably not going to be good for me mentally. So yeah, balance, right? Finding the balance
Mm-hmm.
um, between what's joyful and what makes you truly happy, and um, what's just like a temporary fix or a temporary high. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
not, not really even sure how to demarcate those or separate those things completely, because I see what your question really is, but at the same time we humans are so wonderfully different
Mm-hmm.
that I can just
Mm-hmm.
imagine, so for someone kind of
Mm-hmm.
going and doing all these things might someone make them feel well for a minute, and that might
Mm-hmm.
be helpful to them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I appreciate that, and I receive that, and that's even good for me as like a pushing back of like a, because it's almost like a, oh, be careful of that judgment, right? That like if we can be a little bit more, and of course you didn't say it that way, but of um that care to be open to see things from other perspectives and to give people grace and not just see things, yeah, from the paradigm that I operate from. Yeah. Uh, so thank you for that. Um, that's great. There's more in there to mine. But let's move on to the next question, which is, what are you currently learning about living your healthiest life? And so that might, you've touched a couple times on talking about kind of as you age and as you mature, and talking about the graces that have come kind of with that. Um, so we're, I don't know, are we technically in the pandemic still? Are we not? Things are
Who
definitely
knows?
opening up, right? We're doing stuff. I think people are like,
It
we're finding what our kind of new normal is with
is,
like
yeah.
the new concerns that we have to deal with. So we had this restriction, quite restricted for a few years, and now is are there lessons coming out of that, or what is you think a lot about this healthy living, this balance of your body, mind, soul, and the wholeness in there and alignment. What's like on the, just whatever you feel comfortable with, but what's kind of on the leading edge for you of things that you're, lessons that are deepening or evolving for you, or maybe it's new questions your daughter's asking, or I don't know.
Oh yeah, right now, I'm I'm working on kind of disconnecting healthily from
Mm,
things and people, and being okay with letting people go, and also being okay with, just being. I've always, been okay with my own self, in the sense of I could be by myself for many days and I wouldn't have a problem with that. But it's also important to me at the same time to connect with people. So I'm kind of trying my best to get back to that, and just reminding myself that I am just absolutely and completely enough, in
mm-hmm.
even in whatever ways might not seem cool or awesome to other people. Just because there's so much of myself that I could not control, and there's so much of it that I can control. So I cannot choose, how who my parents were. I cannot choose. Oh, I could not. I could not choose, who actually birthed me, or like I cannot choose where I'm from. I cannot choose how I speak, or I cannot choose how tall or short I am. I can't choose so many things I cannot control. And so because of that, I understand that it's important to know that just as you are, whether or not the entire world says you're the standard of goodness or beauty or whatever it is, you're just enough, and
Mm,
just, reveling in your own uniqueness. And that's something I'm exploring right now, and I'm
mm.
trying to get back to so much. I'm reminding myself of that every day. Um, yeah, so I would definitely, I think that's really my answer to that question, because it, this past week, every single day that I wake up, I try to remind myself of this in one way or the other. And in moments that I forget, and I'm like literally seeking, like, oh, is there a book I can read to remind myself how to even
Mm-hmm.
navigate this in
Mm-hmm.
in real time? Because sometimes you might know something and you're not even sure how to implement it and how to
Yes.
believe it. And so you
Yeah.
need help
Mm-hmm.
to you need help. You need words.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't even have words to explain how you're feeling about, things. And
So often. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Most of the
and
time.
so
Yeah.
I'm trying to find, someone, or who's able to articulate it and able
Mhm.
to help me kind of see things like clearer. So that's literally where I'm at right now, like today, in this hour, in this
Mhm.
moment. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
literally where I'm at, just like kind of getting back to myself, getting back to
Mhm.
being okay with myself, and getting back to being okay with, people kind of coming into your life for a minute and going out of
Mhm.
it, and things like that
Mhm.
you know
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And I'm like, speaking of feeling, and that, like I feel that. I feel a compassion towards
Mhm.
like the pain of that, and I also feel
Yeah.
the empathy of like having experienced that myself, and even fairly acutely right now in my life is where, as I explore like even deeper, even more deeply, who am I?
Hmm.
And with more permission and more freedom than I've ever given myself, that there is a letting go. And part of that letting go is, right, it's just an uncertainty of,
Mm.
is this a, like, is this relationship going to be gone, and like we'll live kind of peripheral lives, and we will have had that common history? Or is this, a thing where there's a space and it'll come back? Or um yeah, there's so much of that. And I just, speaking of not having words to articulate it, I feel like I'm exemplifying that right now of how do
Mhm.
you uh, how do you describe the depth of the deep emotion? Because like you're talking about, and I believe that we're profoundly designed, our deepest need is for love and connection. And so as we pursue that, and you kind of mentioned that, like in being connected or seeking connection, you're seeking risk, right? or you're maybe not seeking risk, but you're having to accept risk.
Yes.
Either, and I think when we're younger, maybe, I don't know, it probably depends how your personality and how your brain works. So you're either aware of that risk or not aware of that risk, right? Like for some people, maybe they just go into something and they don't know, oh, my
Yeah.
heart could be broken, or I could be devastated. And then some people, and maybe a little bit more how I tend to, is I observe people and I'm like, oh my gosh, people's heart get broken. Okay, that could happen to me, and then, and like even as a small child, it was hard for me to like call and invite friends to do something, because if they say no, that was like devastating to me, even though they could just be busy. But to me, you're just like shooting me down, right? It
Yes,
was always
yes.
much more easier like a neighborhood friend where it's more casual. You just run across the street or you see each other out and you like want to play, but to like
Find
make,
safety.
to make a like discreet call to somebody, like I can remember like a classmate of mine, Zoe, like this is probably, I'm like third grade. I'm just like so nervous to like call. And I think that's like continued into my adulthood, right? Like, because those things of our childhood
Yeah,
don't just go
they
away,
they
right? Like
don't.
our
Yeah,
our
they don't.
tendencies, and maybe they get masked or suppressed, or we can kind of avoid them. But I think
Mhm.
there's still that, for me, even like a barrier to connection sometimes, because there can be even an acute pain of like trying to schedule something.
Mhm. Yeah,
Let
yeah.
alone when you've been in a relationship and had all sorts of experiences and intimacy, and then to have that evolve and change, and you can choose to cling to that, and then but there's also a suffering in clinging to something that's naturally, uh, maybe the invitation is more to a spaciousness, and to that you wouldn't be quite so intimate, that there would be a spaciousness to allow other things and other connections to happen.
To
So
happen, yeah.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just, yeah, being human is so hard, right? It is
Hmm.
hard.
Hmm. Hmm.
And at a point in your adulthood, you sort of come to the realization that you are not likely gonna be, say, I'm trying to think about someone really famous.
Hmm.
You're not gonna be like this famous person. You're not gonna be, and the reason I use the example of a famous person or like a super wealthy person is because for those people, they for them they probably experience a lot of hurt anyway,
Hmm.
because sometimes people are trying to come towards them
Hmm.
because everyone's seeking them out. For one, it's tough
Hmm.
for them to know who's really genuine and
Yeah.
who's really for them rather than who's trying to
Hmm.
take from them. So we as just regular everyday people, and God help you, you're not like, um, you don't have a lot of money, and so, or whatever it is, people are not flocking towards you in that way. In building your connection, you likely will have to seek people out if you desire that. And I believe wholeheartedly
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
we all desire connection with other humans. We all want to be loved, we want to receive love, and a lot of times we probably want to give love too and have it
Hmm.
be received well. um, because of that, we have to take risks. We have to,
Hmm.
and I cannot even imagine being a super famous person as well. How do you even, you know, navigate that? How do you know who's for you? And then you navigate it in different, while people are flocking to you and literally rolling out the red carpet for you when you're coming somewhere. At the same time, you're probably seeking genuine, relationships. And so that's also risky, even as much as it might be easier because people are coming towards them and wanting, the connection with them. But for you or me, I would consider just regular everyday people. Um, the way we're seeking connection is a little different. We have to be kind of intentional about it.
Hmm.
And even in that, there's a whole lot of risk because the person that we maybe chosen say, hey, I'd like to be friends with a person, may not choose you in the same way or may not even value your friendship
Yes.
exactly the same way. And that's
Yep.
always tough. Or the situation where, you've had many years of friendship, many years of a relationship with someone, and then it's transitioning into something different,
Hmm.
who how does our brain even, wrap around something like that? Because we might be holding on real tight,
Mm-hmm.
rather, and the other party's like, kind of letting go, or the relationship in itself just changes, and you're all in different phases of your
Mm-hmm.
lives. And so because of and that's why I speak about like letting go. That's really
Yeah.
what I'm speaking of, in particular, those sort of relationships that evolve or and change, and people maybe feel like, oh yeah, I don't necessarily have value for this person, or I don't need this person in my life, or at least they act that way. And so you're trying to figure out like, how do you navigate that? Or sometimes you internalize it as maybe something wrong with you too, and that's also tough.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to make sure, or personally I have to make sure that I'm not internalizing it, so because we as humans, we see things the way we want to see it. We see things from the lens of our own experience. We even look at people from the lens of our experiences. We look at people in the way that we are, more than
Mm-hmm.
anything else, because really every single one of us is deserving of the very best kind of friendship, is deserving of the best kind of love, is deserving of wholeness and goodness. And it doesn't matter whether or not someone sees that. They just really, they every single one of us, we wear like a lens in our eyes that has us seeing things a certain way. So we might not see someone valuable of something, or not worthy of our time, not worthy of this, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not because that person's not worthy of time. It's just that
Yeah.
you're seeing it in that way, or that person's seeing it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that I'm communicating, because I'm saying a lot, and I'm just hoping that
You are, and I'm just receiving it. And whoever listens to this will just receive it as a gift, because I think it's so helpful to talk about this, and we don't, because I think it is so common, or it's just a part of the human experience, right? And but we tend to often view our, like, we're so concerned about ourselves, right? Like like, and we have our own perspective,
yeah,
right? Instead of seeing ourselves as um there's so many metaphors for this, right? In Christianity, it's like the body, right? That we're different parts in different bodies. So there's that imagery of like, yeah, eye, nostril, tooth. It doesn't say that in the scriptures, but the arm versus the ear. That we have like these different roles, we have these different capacities, and there's so many metaphors, like wherever you take it from, because
hmm
whatever things are true, different places are going to give um, different metaphors for that, and that's what I'm hearing you. Uh, Part of what I'm hearing you articulate, and that uh, balance of self-respect and self-knowledge and claiming yourself. So it as a lot of things are, that like the deep wisdom is very simple, but it's also very complex and
it is,
nuanced,
yeah.
right? So to say like, oh, I know myself, and then know where you end, right? And that person is, right? But then also knowing this common underlying value, or there's so many different ways to say it, energizing force, or you could say God, or you could say the universe, this thing that sustains us and connects us all.
So good, yeah.
Like, that's what I'm hearing you say. And so often we fail to see each other, because that person's annoying, that person's wrong, that person's evil, that person's egotistical,
Yeah,
that
that
person.
person's not rich enough, that person's not famous, that person's not
Yeah.
cool, that person's not,
Yeah.
it's not pretty,
Yes.
it's not handsome,
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Whatever it is, the
we
things that, yeah, separate us, yeah, how somebody speaks, how, where they
right.
live, like geographically within the same state or country, or uh like in Wisconsin, we have, I'm not going to say it on the podcast, but there's like an acronym that's got some swear words in it, of like that we think of about people that live across the border in Illinois. I grew up 6 miles from Illinois. And it wasn't just because of them, it was mostly how they drove on the road. But you had like this acronym to be like, oh, those people.
Those people.
And people, when I meet people from Illinois, like I'm like, do you know? And they don't know that we refer to them like this. And they haven't told me that there's another way. They probably just think, people from Wisconsin are a little bit more like, they wouldn't say this exactly, but like hillbillies or something like that, like kind of country folk. So they don't bother to even have like this thing. But yeah, like this whole kind of othering. So you talk about the glasses, like our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also a component of, and I think this is I am sensing that we're both on this journey of shedding layers that keep us from showing our real self. So another part of me, if I can share, when I was young, like
Please
as a teenager. So this is just like, like, oh, look at like a little spotlight into part of Elle. Like I was so happy. I don't have any kids and I don't know if I'll like adopt or how this will happen. But when I was in high school, thinking about my future life, I like couldn't wait to be grandma, because grandma just gets to wear like the polyester whatever and that, and just I was like, I can't wait. I'm gonna wear like plaid with like paisley with like, and I'm just gonna say whatever and people will just be like, oh, that's grandma. Like as a teenager, I longed for that, just to be able to express myself and be myself. And then, you go through your 20s and your 30s and all this time you're just trying to be like cool and like fit in. And now I think we're on the arc of like realizing that doesn't satisfy, that doesn't bring the joy that you're talking about, because joy is like a more sustaining thing. There's going to be moments of it. It's not a constant joy isn't just like a constant emotion, but it is like a thing as you practice, as you have like these disciplines, as you change like how you view the world, as you like shed these layers, like you can be in the more this state of grace and joy. And but so I feel like that's kind of what's happening now as I'm in middle age, is like shedding these layers. And it's like, okay, it's time to like, why wasn't I a grandma, like in my 20s? Like, why couldn't I just and I think we try to in whatever way we can muster, but maybe there's like a little bit more strength and resolve and wisdom that's happening as we age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's good. I like kind of hearing about you wanting to be a grandma. I love that. I think that's cool. Yeah, I think that's actually really cool.
Yeah. It wasn't even about like having grandkids and like that stuff. Like it was just like
being,
just for myself, like of how but actually, I mean, there's more things you could say about grandparents, because it seems like they do just can love even more than parents can. Right?
Grandparents are wonderful. Yeah,
because they just don't have that connection and that intertwined like identity as much like as parents have. But anyway, that's a whole nother whole other thing.
Yeah, I get to experience how a grandparent can feel for their child, for their grandchildren, from my mother, how she is with my daughter, or my husband's parents and how they are with my daughter. And it's quite wonderful. I'm excited to be a grandparent one day, I hope.
Yeah, it's like a special thing. Yeah, so that's added onto my list now. At first it was about me, but now it's just like, because there is something that seems very special about that love, just to be able to shower attention, affection, doting and that's what love should be, without expecting something in return. Just to really like delight in somebody's presence. And I think and that can happen even in romantic relationships, but I think there's a strong struggle and rub with that, right? That we can take people for granted. And, and that's, when we see that in a lot in relationships, and I've certainly experienced that myself. Well, I would love to hear, and like for our listeners, what is something, so from Arafat Salvador's perspective, what is something you wish that people knew more about living their healthiest life? So from your perspective, when you look around and you're like, gosh, like people are suffering and they don't need to be, or if they only did this, or because obviously there's lots of things we could do to
There's
be
so
more
much.
healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like when you look around, like what's your,
I think um, what what I feel like might be helpful to people might be just kind of knowing that they're enough. And that's a message that's tough
mm,
to
hmm
not only receive, and it's tough to even internalize and put into practice as well. So I feel like if we could just even get that, a lot of kind of chasing after things and after, people, and it almost will not happen. And things might even happen for us more organically. And we will be more at peace in our minds and in our bodies. Um, and I also feel like understanding the connection between the mind and the body as well can, you know, can also do a lot of good for people. Getting understanding how finding wholeness in your mind sort of manifests in your body, and finding wholeness in your body can manifest towards wholeness in your mind in many ways as well. I think that might also, you know, yeah, that might be what's kind of, I feel. I might not be right at all about this, but that's what I feel about everything that's going on around us. Just I feel like half of the problems that we end up facing in the world, and that's created by people, it's because, for one, they're kind of seeking validation here or seeking validation there, or trying to feel more powerful over something, so they're making rules, or that may harm someone else, but it might make them feel better, like, oh yeah, he got this, or my view of the world is now lorded over everyone else now, that sort of thing. And it's almost not recognizing that the individuality of yourself and other people. And hopefully, I'm hoping that sort of translate, but at least that's how I feel like us not appreciating other people is a reflection of us not knowing ourselves and not understanding our own self, and not feeling like we're enough, and feeling like
mm,
we just have to be all encompassing and over all the
mm,
people, kind of thing.
mm.
Does that make sense?
It is. I wanted to write a note down about that. But I'll just respond. Uh, yeah, it seems to me like what I'm hearing, or as it occurs to me, what you're saying is when you don't know or believe you're enough, or whatever the complexity is or the nuance of that, when you don't know that, you're trying to be everything. And as you try to be everything, which we can't, um, it creates suffering for us individually, but then it also isn't creating the opportunity or the space for that other person to shine in the way that they're meant to
Mm-hmm.
shine. Because I do think I really like the imagery of like us as lights, right? And this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Like I really, I believe we all hold darkness and we all hold light,
Yeah.
right? And if you're not acknowledging your own version of light, yeah, like like the strength of the light comes as we like, well, let our layers off, right? We can dim our light. There's always like that flame inside, like, and it might just be embers because maybe we've like snuffed them out, but there's always like something, right? And we can nurture that, and that can be big and get to like a bonfire, that can keep a lot of people warm and sustain a lot of people around us and be really generative, create a lot of energy. So within ourself, but so much of like darkness in the world, that I think like the problems we're having, this is what I'm kind of filtering what you're saying towards, is
Good.
if we, like, I need to do my best to let my light shine, and then acknowledge your light and do what I can to encourage you um to shine your light. And I think sometimes when I try to do that, if I kind of call myself out, is maybe even I can even twist that and have expectations of like, you need to shine your light, right? Versus like calling out like the goodness in people, like in encouragement and praise and how that can, like, seeing the uniqueness of people and then and highlighting that. And because I don't think we're very good at encouraging one another. Like, I think we're quite careless with our words. And if I ever get this book out that I've written, like I have a section where I talk about that, like the words that we use to praise people are actually images of death, like you're killing it. Excuse me? Like what? Versus like just saying what is that beautiful, inspiring, wonderful thing that you're observing in that other person. And it might just be like a dim little, like light little ember, but to acknowledge that, because it might even just be like, oh, I just noticed you kind of perked up when you talked about photography, or I just saw that when you spoke about our cooking, or I just, I see you watch a lot of cooking shows, like, like whatever it is. Anyway, that's what I'm hearing you. And I don't know if I'm tracking, but that's kind of what I'm
you're
hearing, and kind
tracking.
of expanded on. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we cause a lot of pain and suffering to others when we're, we ourselves are not where we're supposed to kind of be personally. Um, and we don't know ourselves. We don't feel like we're enough. We feel like we have to compensate in one way or the other. And so in that, we start hurting people, we start hurting ourselves, and we create a lot of suffering. So you are indeed tracking.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I think that's wonderful advice. The concept of enoughness is definitely something that I meditate on, and that's part of like a daily rhythm that I turn to as I think about health and wholeness and wealth, and me being myself. So I love that. I think that's great. If we did that more, I think the world would be a better place. I think we would be living healthier lives. So
yes, I think so too.
What a wonderful invitation and suggestion. So one thing I wanted to say earlier, when you mentioned Nigerian pop, do you have any recommendations that you can rattle off? You can send me some later, and I can put it in the notes for people that might not, with your Nigerian heritage, you can give it a little insight. And because I think, right, as we want to learn from one another and their experiences. So selfishly, for me, if you have some names of who
I
you
feel like
like,
the whole world is probably listening to Nigerian pop music right now. But right now I'm listening to Burna Boy. I love Burna Boy, and so I'm listening to his latest album. And there's a new Nigerian artist. I think his name is Ashake. And I like that artist as well. But he's a new artist. I am not sure what he's going to put out more, but so far what he's got, I love it. Yeah, it's sort of upbeat, very upbeat music. Maybe, I don't know if you've been listening to Nigerian. To be honest, the people that teach me about Nigerian music half the time, they're not Nigerians at all. I have a friend, she's American, and she would say, like, oh, have you listened to this? I'm like, oh no, I haven't. I got to catch up, But it's always cool, like kind of exchanging sounds with her, and it's mostly Nigerian pop music. Yeah, Nigerian music has evolved a lot over the last few years, and it's amazing, and what growth can happen out of a lot of people just putting a lot of hard work. And I guess also I think that growth probably happened from Nigerians even rallying around their own music and saying, you know what, this is our stuff and we love it. And just in its authenticity, because they're putting out this pop music, not, well, some of the sounds are being borrowed by other people. And you know how music kind of evolves, and the whole world is also very, we live in an entire global village now, so that whatever sound that you produce and put out there, it's essentially belongs to the world. And so we take from each other's sounds. And so Nigerian music might sound very close to American music sometimes, and vice versa, and it's all kind of intertwined. And because of this kind of exchange of culture, and that's happening with sort of the globalization of the world, whether we like it or not, the world is is an entire global village.
It's true.
And
true.
I'm excited to introduce you to some Nigerian music. You'll be surprised that you probably know them a lot already. because
Okay,
you're right.
great.
You just may never have thought
Well,
about
that,
them
yeah,
as being
then maybe
Nigerian.
that, well, yeah. So there'll be a learning either way, like learning that it's Nigerian artists. Or you said there's a new, and I don't know this, so I need the spelling to even be able to, find that. So if you can pass that on to me, I can pass that on to our listeners, whatever you
Yes, I'd
would
love
want to
that.
suggest. And we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but if you're interested in showing any of your photography, there's a few avenues we could do it. You could send me some images, and for those that watch on YouTube, we could kind of embed some of that in there.
Oh, okay, that would be awesome.
Or if you want, over the internet, if you want to direct people to kind of where they could find some of your images.
I'll send you some pictures. That would be cool.
Yeah. Okay. That would be a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
I'd love
So
that.
yeah, Arafat Salvador, thank you so much for joining the Lyle podcast today.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. May you see the blessing. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Lyle podcast. If you liked what you heard, you can find me on Instagram at the Elle, as well as YouTube, the internet, www.theelbetrell.com. And that's about it. And back here for our next episode of the podcast. Subscribe and leave a nice review if you think it'll be helpful for other people. Only then. Thanks. May you see the blessing.